A Roman saw the world as a structured grid, paved in solid stone and measured by the steady march of miles under a predictable sun. But as you cross the Rhine, the roads vanish. The sun disappears behind a canopy so thick it feels like a physical weight on your shoulders. The Romans didn't just fear the men in these woods, they feared the woods themselves. They feared a land that refused to be tamed, a land where the gods demanded blood and where a lone soldier wasn't a conqueror. He was prey. If you're ready to see the ancient world through the eyes of the men who lived and died in these shadows, step forward. Let's begin. The architecture of nightmare, the Hercynian forest. To understand why a Roman soldier, a man trained to face down charging elephants and Macedonian phalanxes, would tremble at the sight of a tree line, we have to look at the sheer scale of the Germanic wilderness. In the eyes of the Roman administration, Germania was terra incognito. The great Hercynian forest was rumoured to stretch for 60 days' journey, a distance almost impossible for a Mediterranean mind to process. This wasn't a park or a managed woodland, this was a dense, suffocating blanket of oak and beech, interspersed with treacherous bogs and blackwater marshes that never saw the light of day. The Roman military machine was built entirely on visibility and order. They fought in 3 lines of disciplined infantry. They relied on being able to see their centurion's crest and hear the sharp blare of the trumpet calls. The moment a century entered a deep Germanic wood, that order disintegrated. The trees broke the lines. The mist muffled the commands. A lone soldier sent on a scouting mission or a wood-gathering detail was effectively blind. In the Mediterranean, you can see a threat coming from half a mile away. In the German woods, a warrior painted in charcoal and animal fat could be standing 5 feet away from you, and you wouldn't know it until his seax was at your throat. This total loss of sensory control was the Roman soldier's greatest nightmare. The psychological war, spirits, and spectres. We have to remember that these soldiers were deeply superstitious men. They believed in genius loci, the spirit of a place. Italy was a land of civilized gods and clear rituals. But Germania? This was a land of older, hungrier deities. The legionaries heard stories of the Hercynian elk that had no knees and had to lean against trees to sleep, and of birds whose feathers glowed in the dark like torches. But more terrifying were the human elements. The Germanic tribes didn't build stone temples, they performed their rites in the raw, terrifying heart of sacred groves. Finding a sacred grove was a psychological death sentence for a Roman. They would stumble upon human heads nailed to trees, or the bleached bones of horses suspended from branches as offerings to Wodan. These weren't just enemy territories, they were cathedrals of slaughter designed to unnerve the invader. When a soldier was alone, his mind became his worst enemy. Every groan of a shifting branch sounded like the war cry of a Suebi warrior. The darkness wasn't just the absence of light, it was a physical presence that felt like it was trying to swallow the Roman Empire whole. They felt as though the very earth beneath their boots was hostile. The Germanic tribes used the terrain as a weapon, but which tribe do you think was the most formidable opponent for Rome? The Cherusci, the Cimbri, or perhaps the Marcomanni? Let us know in the comments. The tactical trap. Why the legion failed here. Why couldn't the best soldiers in the world simply cut the forest down? Because the forest fought back. The Germanic warriors practiced what we now call asymmetrical warfare. They knew that in a fair fight on an open field, the Roman legion would win every time. So, they never gave the Romans a fair fight. The forest was a series of natural choke points. A path might look clear, only to lead a soldier directly into a blind moor, a peat bog that looked like solid ground but would swallow a man in full plate armor in seconds. The tribesmen used earthworks hidden by brush, creating man-made traps that funneled Roman scouts into killing zones where they were outnumbered 10 to 1. Then there was the equipment. The Roman shield was a masterpiece of engineering, but it was made of wood and leather. In the constant rain and humidity of the German autumn, these shields became waterlogged and doubled in weight. A soldier alone, struggling to carry a 30-pound shield through knee-deep mud, was no longer a soldier, he was a target. His gladius was designed for tight, thrusting movements in a disciplined formation, but in the woods, where combat was frantic, messy, and individual, the longer, heavier Germanic swords and the terrifying spears had the massive advantage of reach. The Roman was literally ill-equipped for the environment he was trying to conquer. The fate of the disappeared. The fear of being alone in the forest was rooted in a very grim reality. The Germanic tribes did not usually take prisoners for ransom. If a Roman soldier was captured, his fate was often a ritualistic end in the bogs. Archaeologists have found bog bodies dating back to this era, men who were strangled, decapitated, or had their throats slit before being pinned into the mud with hurdles. To the Germanic tribes, the forest and the marsh were gateways to the divine. A Roman soldier was the ultimate sacrifice to ensure a good harvest or a victory in battle. The Romans knew this. They saw the remnants of the 17, 18, 19 legions after the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. When Germanicus returned to the site years later, his men found mounds of bones and skulls nailed to trees. This wasn't just war, it was a psychological message. The message was, the forest belongs to us, you are merely meat. For a lone soldier, that imagery was a constant haunting shadow in the back of his mind. The loneliness of the limes. Even when the Romans built the limes, the great frontier wall, the fear didn't vanish. A soldier pulling guard duty on a wooden tower, looking out into the endless sea of black trees, knew that the wall was just a line in the dirt. The Germanic people were masters of the ghost attack. They would use animal skins to blend into the undergrowth and move with a silence that defied Roman logic. A sentry could be standing at his post, turn his head to cough, and find his comrade had vanished into the green wall without a sound. This led to a specific kind of Roman PTSD. Chronicles tell of soldiers who became forest mad, driven to insanity by the constant tension of the unseen. They were fighting an enemy they couldn't see, in a terrain they couldn't map, against gods they didn't understand. The psychological toll of holding the line against an invisible foe was often more damaging than the actual physical combat. The cultural divide, nature versus civilization. Ultimately, the Roman fear of the Germanic forest was a clash of worldviews. The Romans saw nature as something to be paved, irrigated, and boxed. It was a resource to be managed. To the Germanic tribes, nature was home. They didn't live on the land, they lived in it. Their houses were tucked into clearings, their paths were secret, and their strength was drawn from the very soil the Romans hated. A lone Roman in the woods was a man out of his element, stripped of his technology and his brothers. He was a creature of the city trying to survive in the womb of the wild. It was a battle he was never destined to win. The Germanic tribesmen thrived where the Roman withered. The forest was the one thing the Roman Empire couldn't truly conquer. They could win battles, they could burn villages, but the forest always grew back. It remained a dark, looming mystery at the edge of the civilized world, a place where the eagles of Rome didn't dare to fly too deep. It represented the limit of human expansion, a reminder that some parts of the world belong to the ancient ways. The legacy of the shadow. The fear of the Germanic forest changed the course of Western history. After the disasters in these woods, Rome effectively gave up on the dream of conquering Germania. They pulled back to the Rhine and the Danube. They decided that the green hell of the north wasn't worth the blood of their legions. The forest saved the Germanic culture, allowing it to develop independently of Rome, eventually leading to the rise of the kingdoms that would one day replace the empire itself. If the forests had been thinner, or the Romans braver, the Europe we know today would look entirely different. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the darker side of history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our shield wall here at Germanic Arc. We explore the lifestyle, the warfare, and the mysteries of the medieval and ancient Germanic worlds every week. Before you go, leave a comment below with the word forest if you made it to the end of the video. It helps the channel more than you know. Until next time, stay vigilant.